Welcome back to another episode of Up in the Air. I'm Kelly in class, and joining me at the desk this week is Chris Landolfi. Both Chris and I actually just came back from the National Weather Association's annual conference held in California. And Chris, I know I had a great time and I loved it. I thought it was amazing, but how did you like it?
I thought it was great too. We got to meet a bunch of National Weather Service meteorologists, as well as some people in the broadcast industry. And really, you can't complain about being in Southern California, can you?
No, you can't. And you know what? It's an experience I'll never forget.
Well, we have a lot on the show tonight. We have stories on volcanoes, fall foliage, as well as jellyfish. And we'll also be going to the climate wall with our newest member, Vivian Rennie.
We'll have all that and more, but first, here's Update in the Air.
Tourists all throughout Europe flock to Italy's southeast coast to enjoy white sandy beaches and crystal clear water. In addition to these tourists, however, swarms of jellyfish are also enjoying the unusually warm waters. The changing Mediterranean climate has caused the sea to remain warmer for longer, allowing the jellyfish to breed. With populations growing exponentially, Italian officials are looking for any way to contain them. One creative solution essentially boils down to, if you can't beat them, eat them. Local chefs are finding new ways to incorporate jellyfish into their dishes. Italy would be far from the first country to consume jellyfish, however, as countries like Japan and China have been eating them for hundreds of years. Italian chefs do face a roadblock, however, in the European Union. The local jellyfish have to be proven to be safe to consume before they can legally be sold. While it may be a few months before we see jellyfish parmesan, the EU will continue to do research and conduct safety control tests to determine if jellyfish are safe for human consumption.
After last winter and spring brought snowfall and plenty of wet weather, conditions are prime for vibrant foliage across the northeastern United States. According to scientists, trees have responded well to the moisture and look very promising for a good fall foliage this season. However, weather conditions heading into September will play an important role in the outcome of this fall. If we have a wet and warm September, it would spoil some of the colors. Also, if the drought conditions that developed in August lasted into September, then trees would lose their leaves quickly. Though there have been some dry spots across the Northeast this summer, conditions have not been serious enough to spoil the show. The forecast for the remainder of September calls for normal to slightly below normal rainfall, which is unlikely to have a negative impact on the leaves. The greatest threat to vibrancy across the region is warm weather. According to Michael Day, an associate research professor at the University of Maine, a cold snap is what is needed for the Northeast for especially bright colors to develop. Some areas that may struggle this season include the southern Appalachians into the western Carolinas, where wet weather has dominated this summer. Despite the warmer temperatures this past week, the Northeast is still projected to have a fantastic fall foliage this fall.
According to NASA, as of September 13th, Arctic sea ice reached its yearly lowest extent. Analysis of satellite data by NASA showed that at 1.79 million square miles, this year's Arctic sea ice minimum extent is the 8th lowest in the consistent long-term satellite record, which began in 1978. Arctic sea ice, the layer of frozen seawater covering much of the Arctic and neighboring seas, is often referred to as the planet's air conditioner. Its white surface bounces solar energy back to space, cooling the globe. The sea ice cap changes with the season, growing in the autumn and winter and shrinking in the spring and summer. Its minimum summertime extent, which typically occurs in September, has been decreasing overall at a rapid pace since the late 1970s due to warming temperatures. This year, temperatures in the Arctic have been relatively moderate for such high latitudes, even cooler than average in some regions. Still, the 2017 minimum sea ice extent is below the 1981 to 2010 average minimum extent. Arctic sea ice extent was the second lowest measured in 2016 due to unusual weather conditions, including strong summer storms that hammered the ice and sped up its melt. Although it was a relatively quiet summer in the Arctic this year, the sea ice has still not recovered from 2016.
Thousands of people have been evacuated from their homes on the Indonesian island of Bali due to fears of Mount Agung potentially erupting. The threat of an eruption was raised to the highest level of 4 by the Indonesia's geological agency. More than 35,000 villagers living around the volcano have been officially evacuated to temporary shelters, sports centers, village halls, or even to the homes of other relatives, according to the Associated Press. The last time Mount Agung erupted was back in 1963. The eruption killed about 1,100 people and emitted an ash cloud as high as 12 miles into the atmosphere. During this eruption, ash reached Indonesia's capital of Jakarta, which is located about 620 miles away. If the volcano erupts early this week and a similar ash cloud is produced, the expected winds would direct it initially southward away from the volcano over Bali and then into the south into the Indian Ocean. How much ash and how long it is emitted will be determined to the extent of how air travel will be affected downstream of the volcano. According to the Geological Agency, Mount Agung's previous eruption suggests that the area in the vicinity of the volcano may face dangerous debris falling from the eruption as well as lava flows.
Mother Nature is assisting firefighters with out-of-control fires in the western U.S. Up to 2 feet of snow has fallen in the Cascades and Northern Rockies, giving firefighters the edge they needed to control dozens of blazes in at least 5 states. Fire danger levels in many national forests have now been reduced to moderate. For much of the summer, fire danger was at an extreme level. Officials warned that while this is a huge help, the fire season is not over yet. Firefighters are now on the offensive with little concern for fires burning out of control. These fires may continue to smolder and smoke and may still be visible around the western U.S., but they are not expected to spread. The 2017 fire season has been one of the costliest on record, due in part to a major drought in the region. The state of Montana alone has spent $53 million battling the flames, while the federal government has spent around $2 billion. After the passing of a cold front, temperatures dropped from the mid-80s to the 40s. Firefighters must now deal with cold, damp, and slippery conditions, but after a long, hot, smoky summer, many are being sent home for some well-deserved rest as winter weather takes hold.
Harvey, Irma, Maria. Do those names sound familiar? Those are just some of the hurricanes that caused devastation to areas in the Caribbean and even the United States. This year's hurricane season is very active and it's not even over yet. Many people affected by these devastating tropical cyclones are left without homes and necessary supplies that are needed in order to survive and are relying on many donations and funds to get back on their feet. If you're wondering how you can help, here are some ways to do so. Many people think that food, clothing, and supplies might be the first thing that people need to donate. However, cash donations are the best. When donating to an organization like the American Red Cross or another reputable charity, monetary donations are the best. It can be used immediately in response to a crisis and allows the organization to purchase exactly what is needed and when it is needed. Another way to help is to give blood. During emergencies and disaster situations, the blood supply might run low due to an increased quantity needed. Donating blood helps to save lives in the emergency room. Another way to help that you might not think of is to offer housing. Airbnb, a popular online housing app, has a disaster response program. It allows people to find a house or a room during or after a disaster. The Urgent Accommodations tool allows users to offer their nearby homes for displaced victims. While food and clothing donations are needed as well, don't forget about some of these ways to help relief efforts.
Welcome back to the show.
We now have a special feature on weather legislation with Will Budock and Brian Zizik.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill.
Many of you are familiar with the Schoolhouse Rock song that my friend Brian here just attempted to sing. But what many of you aren't familiar with is that this song can be applied to the weather enterprise.
That's right, Will. There's currently a bill in Congress right now, H.R. 553, known as the Weather Researching and Forecasting Innovation Act. And we had a chance to speak with a few congressional aides about the bill. Taylor Jordan is a professional staff member on the majority side for the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology in the United States House of Representatives. He took some time to tell us about some of the major focus points of the bill.
There are a number of things that the weather bill does. First, it increases the U.S. Funding for weather research, and we see that as being vital to helping protect American lives and property. Secondly, it creates a number of programs such as the Tornado Warning Extension Program with the goal of extending tornado lead times. It continues the current hurricane program. It requires NOAA to undertake different types of assessments.
The bill also looks to incorporate the private sector into one of NOAA's core competencies.
And the bill pushes NOAA to more promptly look at commercial options. We do have a pilot program for NOAA to enter into agreements with private sector companies and test and validate the data that they provide. We ask that NOAA, when moving forward with big government systems, consider commercial options before solely just looking at the government stuff that they've been doing for decades. We're asking them to think outside the box, to look for help.
The bill seems to be a rare example of agreement between both parties and both houses.
I think that says something about the current, state of politics and how we can come together and give and take to come to an agreement. I will also say that in addition to being bipartisan, this bill is bicameral. So it's not just the House talking to the House, it's the Senate and House talking to each other as well.
Taylor seems confident the bill will become law.
I am very positive about it. I think, if everything goes as it should, we should have a bill, on the president's desk to sign in the next month or so.
Well, there you have it. The bill has passed the House earlier this year and is currently in the Senate as we speak, waiting to be passed there.
And although there are complications when passing a bill, insiders feel confident that this time around, the bill will be finding its way to the president's desk. Now, Brian, how about finishing that jingle for us?
Well, I think we've had just about enough singing for today. For Up in the Air, I'm Brian Sizik.
And I'm William Budak.
Welcome back to the show. So Kellyanne, I don't know if you've noticed, but those leaves are really starting to gain some color out there already.
Yes, Chris, I have noticed, and it's only the beginning of fall. We still have the remainder of fall to go, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I thought it felt more like summer these past couple of days rather than fall. But you know what? I know that Vivian has the outlook on the temperatures coming up, but Vivian, what can you tell us?
I do have that outlook coming up, but first we're going to look at the normals for this time of year. As you can see, it's pretty around the average right now for this time of the year, but we're going to be seeing a little bit less sunlight and a little bit less heat every day moving into the fall season. Overall, it's going to be a very nice fall. We're starting to move into those temperatures coming up. Something to look forward to is the fall foliage. I know that outside right now it's getting very beautiful. We're not quite at the peak right now. That peak is farther up into Maine and Vermont is where we're going to be seeing the majority of those beautiful fall colors. We're going to be seeing more of that in Pennsylvania in the next few weeks. Definitely something to look forward to. Looking at the temperature outlook for the period from October 3rd to October 9th, we're going to be seeing those below average temperatures centered up in the Pacific Northwest, up in Washington and Oregon, and even into Idaho. We're going to be seeing above average temperatures really in the rest of the states, centered in the Great Lakes area and everywhere from Florida to Maine. We're going to be seeing those above average temperatures, but getting more into that fall feeling as we move throughout the week. Looking into our precipitation outlook, there is going to be above normal precipitation up in the north of the states, especially in Montana, where they're desperately looking for a little bit more precipitation with the drought there, but we'll get back to that in a minute. But then we're looking at these below normal precipitation amounts into the Mississippi Valley and the Midwest. We're going to be seeing those below normal precipitation amounts and above normal temperatures for this time of the year. Looking at that drought that I kind of teased a little bit earlier, that drought is really centered near Billings, Montana, where they're going to benefit from the increased precipitation, putting out some fires, and really giving those people a little bit of relief from that drought. Looking into the East Coast, we're seeing much less drought, really none in the state of Pennsylvania, but we're looking into Boston and into Maine, where there's a little bit of a drought, but nothing nearly as severe as in Montana. Looking at our weekend outlook, we're seeing a beautiful day, a little bit cooler for the Penn State football game at 3:30. In those low 60s, mostly clear, and then Sunday it's going to be mostly clear again in those mid 60s for the rest of the weekend. That's all I have for you guys. Back to the desk.
All right, thanks, Vivian. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Up in the Air. I'm Kelly in class.
And I'm Chris Landolfi. Thanks for watching. Join us next week, Up in the Air.